Some women don't chase, and yet they're never forgotten. There's a particular kind of woman who moves through the world like shadow and light intertwined, present when she chooses to be, absent when her soul calls for solitude. She understands something that most never grasp, that the deepest wound you can inflict upon a man's psyche isn't anger, isn't tears, isn't pleading. It's the profound silence of your complete withdrawal. This is the dark feminine move that haunts him long after you've disappeared from his horizon. Not dark as in malicious, but dark as in mysterious, as in the fertile void from which all creation springs. Carl Jung spoke of the anima, the feminine aspect that lives within every man's unconscious, the part of his psyche that yearns for connection, beauty, and emotional depth. Most men spend their lives unconsciously seeking this feminine energy in others, projecting their inner anima onto the women they encounter, never realizing they're chasing their own reflection. She becomes his messiah, his mirror, his salvation, until she doesn't. Consider the man who pursues with intensity, who floods her phone with messages, who appears at her workplace with flowers, who promises the world while delivering only fragments of himself. His behavior reveals not love, but a desperate attempt to possess what he believes will complete him. He has mistaken her for his missing piece, when in truth she is whole unto herself. In Jungian terms, he is living in projection, seeing in her not who she truly is, but who his unconscious needs her to be. And therein lies her power. The moment she steps out of his projection, she becomes unreachable, untouchable, incomprehensible to his ego-driven mind. The awakening comes like dawn breaking through storm clouds, slow, then sudden. You watch him perform his familiar dance of pursuit, and something shifts within your chest. Perhaps it's the way he speaks over you at dinner, or how his attention splinters when his phone buzzes, or the hollow feeling that settles in your stomach when you realize you've been auditioning for a role in his life rather than living your own. This is what the Stoics called the dichotomy of control, recognizing what belongs to you and what does not. His feelings, his choices, his capacity for genuine intimacy, these are not yours to manage. Your response to his behavior, your boundaries, your presence or absence, these belong entirely to you. The trauma-informed part of your psyche recognizes the familiar pattern, the intermittent reinforcement, the hot and cold dynamics, the way he seems most interested when you're pulling away. Your nervous system, once activated by this push-pull dance, now observes it with curious detachment. She begins to withdraw, not with announcement, not with explanation, but with the quiet grace of smoke dissipating in wind. Her responses become shorter, less frequent. She stops initiating contact. When he calls, she doesn't answer immediately, not because she's playing games, but because she's remembering what her own voice sounds like without the echo of his expectations. She stops being available for his convenience, stops reshaping herself to fit the contours of his emotional availability. This isn't manipulation. This is individuation. Jung described individuation as the process of integrating the conscious and unconscious parts of the mind to achieve psychological wholeness. She is no longer willing to fragment herself to accommodate his projections. The man experiences this withdrawal as a profound disruption to his internal world. His anima projection begins to crumble. The woman he thought he knew, compliant, available, eager for his attention, is revealing herself to be something far more complex and autonomous than his ego could comprehend. His pursuit intensifies, but now it carries the desperate energy of someone trying to grasp water. He sends longer messages, makes grander gestures, promises to change, all unconscious attempts to restore the projection that once made him feel whole. But she has stepped into what Jung called the transcendent function, the bridge between conscious and unconscious that allows for true transformation. She sees him clearly now, perhaps for the first time, not as the idealized version she once hoped he might become, nor as the villain her hurt feelings want to paint him as, but as a human being caught in his own unconscious patterns, projecting his unlived life onto others because he lacks the courage to face his own shadow. From this place of clarity, something remarkable happens. Compassion arises, but not the kind that sacrifices her well-being for his comfort. This is the fierce compassion of the dark feminine, the kind that loves enough to refuse participation in dysfunction. The silence stretches between them like an ocean. Days pass without contact. His ego, accustomed to her responsiveness, begins to fracture. He scrolls through old messages, analyzes their last interaction, constructs elaborate theories about her behavior. The more she withdraws, the more space she occupies in his mind. This is the paradox of the dark feminine. Her absence creates more presence than her availability ever could. She, meanwhile, is discovering the profound peace that exists in her own company. The anxious attachment patterns that once drove her to seek reassurance from his inconsistent attention are dissolving. She's learning what the Stoic philosopher Epictetus knew, that peace comes not from controlling external circumstances, but from mastering our internal responses to them. Her energy, no longer dissipated in endless attempts to decode his mixed signals, consolidates within her like a gathering storm. She begins to remember who she was before she met him, before she started editing her authentic self to fit his comfort zone. The woman who emerges from this cocoon of solitude is not the same one who entered it. When he finally reaches out, and he always does, something has fundamentally shifted in the dynamic. His voice on the phone carries a different quality, a humility that wasn't there before. He speaks of missing her, of realizing he took her for granted, of wanting to work things out. But she listens with the detached compassion of someone who has already worked things out within herself. This is what Jung meant by the integration of the shadow. She has faced the parts of herself that once sought validation from his approval, that once believed her worth was tied to his attention. She has owned her own projections, recognized her own patterns, and chosen a different path. She responds, or perhaps she doesn't. If she does speak, her words are measured, clear, devoid of the emotional charge that once characterized their exchanges. She has stepped out of the drama triangle, refusing to play victim, rescuer, or persecutor. She simply is. Her withdrawal has forced him to confront the empty space where his projection of her once lived. For the first time, he must face the reality of who she actually is. Not his anima, not his salvation, not his missing piece, but a complete human being with her own desires, boundaries, and path. The profound truth settles in her bones like ancient wisdom. She was never his to lose because she was never lost to begin with. This recognition doesn't come with fanfare or dramatic revelation. It arrives quietly like sunrise, inevitable, natural, transformative. She understands now that his inability to truly see her was never a reflection of her worth, but a limitation of his consciousness. The dark feminine move isn't about punishing him or teaching him a lesson. It's about returning to herself so completely that the version of her he thought he knew dissolves like morning mist. It's about refusing to dim her light to make him comfortable, refusing to shrink herself to fit his limited perception of who she should be. She becomes unreachable, not because she's built walls, but because she's found her center. She becomes unforgettable, not because of what she gave him, but because of what she refused to give up, herself. The woman who walks away in silence isn't weak. She simply sees more, Mamo. She sees the futility of trying to love someone into consciousness. She sees that her presence is a gift, not an obligation. She sees that the right person won't need her advance to recognize her value. And perhaps most importantly, she sees that the most profound act of love, for herself and for him, is the courage to let what isn't meant for her fall away, creating space for what is. Some women don't chase because they've learned that what's meant for them will never require pursuit. They've discovered the dark feminine secret, that the most powerful thing you can do is trust yourself enough to walk away, and the most beautiful thing you can become is exactly who you were before you forgot your own worth. In the end, she doesn't recover from him. She recovers herself. And that, darling, is a move he'll never recover from. So,